What River Rocks, this is Patrick. I'll be leading your devotional this morning. So for this week, in preparation for Resurrection Sunday, we're going through Jesus' statements that he made while being on the cross at Calvary. So these particular statements that we're going to be going through reveal how Jesus demonstrated what it really means to serve God. And the big theme in through all of them is a demonstration of Jesus' self-sacrificial love. So today we're going to be going through two statements from John 19, 26 to 27. And these are going to be important because these are statements that are going to be made to two important people to Jesus at Calvary. So here we'll start in verse 26. So here it starts, when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing by, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." So here in this setting, here we have at the foot of the cross at Calvary, here we see Mary and the Apostle John. So here when it says, in the text, it says, the disciple whom he loved, that's the Apostle John, who is the author of this particular gospel. So the reason why, though, John would write, instead of writing his own name, he would say, the disciple whom Jesus loved. This is actually an example of John's humility. Here, he didn't want to directly reference himself, because he wanted to keep all the attention on Jesus, and especially on what he said. But for the time being here in this verse, let's focus on Mary, because here Jesus says, "Woman, behold your son." Now here, when we're talking about Mary, you have to imagine what Mary is going through right at this moment here at Calvary. So this is the woman that had raised Jesus as her son. And now but right now she's looking at Jesus now on the cross, crucified, and just moments away from death. So in order to imagine what she's going through, you have to realize that the worst thing that you can experience as a human being on this earth is, as a parent, witnessing your own child suffering and dying. Now for Mary, though, as the mother of Jesus, this kind of pain and grief was even worse. Because not only was she seeing her own son and her own child on a cross suffering and dying in such a horrific way, because crucifixion was such a horrific way of method of execution. As the mother of Jesus, she saw this day coming. You have to remember that Mary was born and raised in a Judaic environment, raised as a Jew, so she would have known what this day was. She would have known what this day was going to entail, because she would have known what the Old Testament would have said about her son, the Messiah. You have to remember the Old Testament didn't just mention Jesus as the King of Kings, descended from the line of King David, here to liberate the nation of Israel. But he was also the sacrificial lamb, sent to die for the sins of all of mankind. So if you remember here, so she obviously would have known something like, let's say, Isaiah 53:5. But he was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. And not only would she have known about this from the Old Testament, she would have known about this day from Jesus himself. Because Jesus, oftentimes during his ministry with the disciples, he would often predict his own death. So, for example, he mentioned his death multiple times throughout the four Gospels. But for one example, here it says in Luke 9:22, he tells the disciples, "The Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and be raised the third day." But here, when Jesus is on the cross, he says to her, as he's suffering and dying, "Woman, behold your son." This is the kind of statement where he's reminding her that this was always part of the plan. She knew, and he knew. And because of that, though, it's a glorious thing, because now that means with his death means the resurrection, and with the resurrection means the salvation of all of mankind. And it was this truth that could only have comforted Mary at that time. As the mother of Jesus, watching her son suffering on the cross, the general fact of mankind's salvation just being imminent, just around the corner, was the only thing that could have been a moment of comfort for her at that time. You also have to remember, not only did she know this deep within her heart, she knew this within her heart because remember what the angel told her when she first learned about how she would be the mother of Jesus. Because remember in Luke 1:37 here it says, "For with God nothing will be impossible." And now that Jesus has offered comfort to his mother, he now turns his attention to the Apostle John with his next statement. So here in verse 27, he says, then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that hour, that disciple took her to his own home. So before, Jesus was offering Mary comfort. And here, though, with this statement, behold your mother, this is Jesus commissioning the Apostle John to care for the Virgin Mary. Now remember that John is the disciple whom Jesus loved. So Jesus is giving John this commandment purely out of love. If you remember in Matthew 22, 37 through 39, what are the two greatest commandments? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now pay attention to how Jesus actually commands John here. He might not give a specific kind of direction or a specific kind of action for him to take part in, but here it's what he says to him, behold your mother. So even though Jesus and John weren't brothers by blood, they were brothers by spirit. Therefore, Mary, Jesus' mother by blood, is now John's mother by spirit. So this is a demonstration of how we as believers are a part of God's family through Christ. And because of that, we should always be willing to care for each other, because we are bound to each other, if not by blood, then by spirit and by faith. And then obviously after Jesus commands John to care for his mother, John obeys, rightfully out of love for Jesus. Now overall, what we learn from these two statements is that it's revealed that this is the love and the humility of our Lord Jesus Christ. Now while Jesus was suffering immensely on the cross, just moments away from death, he still turned his attention to the people that loved him and whom he loved. And in this case it would be Mary and John. And only with a heart filled with love could Jesus have endured such suffering and torture. But not only could he endure that, he could only with love and humility could he have conquered death 3 days later. So my prayer for you all is this. Always show the love and humility in your heart as a way to point others in your life towards the glory of our Lord. You should do so at all times, but you should especially do so in times of struggle and hardship, because those are the moments that God makes us for. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. God bless, and happy Resurrection Sunday.